Aspen Waite Radio.
This is Paul Waite from Aspen Waite Radio, and I'm very fortunate to be joined now by a very inspirational chap called Rik Vercoe. And Rik is a bit of a hero, really, aren't you? So I was just teasing him that he's sitting there and not standing or walking around or doing anything with a backdrop. What bridge is that behind you?
That's San Francisco, I think. I'm not sure. I think my daughter's been on here and left that up.
Have you ever run across it?
I haven't, no. One of the places I haven't been.
And why haven't you run around the world yet?
Well, I've run around this country, but no, I've not managed to go as far afield as around the world, I'm afraid.
So Rik has a company called Phoenix Running, and you've actually been nominated for Lifetime Achievement.
I have, yes. Thank you very much.
You don't know who did you pay to do that for you?
No, I'm not sure. There were so many. It's been expensive.
So I would encourage you people listening to check out Rik's profile on Wikipedia, which is fascinating. So I enjoyed reading that last night. You're absolutely completely bonkers and must have legs made of rubber or something. So go back to the beginning. So have you always been a sort of active, athletic sort of chap?
Not really. I mean, I did running at school, I guess, like most other schoolboys of the sort of 70s and 80s era. And then I didn't really run at all through my 20s. And I came back to it in my early 30s, really. Decided that I probably needed a bit of a lifestyle change. I was a fairly heavy smoker at the time. And so I cast my memory back to watching that very first London Marathon, actually, when I was a little boy. And I'd always had it in my head that someday I would run a marathon. And at that point, the marathon is London. And so in my early 30s, I decided to do a little bit of running. And I think if I remember rightly, the first sort of event that I did was in Richmond Park, which was a 10K. And I didn't expect to get round very well. And I sort of trudged my way round and got to the finish line and wasn't too out of breath and thought, well, yeah, I think I'll do a bit more. And it really just escalated from there. So that was probably about 15 years ago, something like that.
And how hard did you train in those days? And how did you make the transition from being slob to world famous runner, really?
Well, in those early days, I didn't train very hard at all, I have to admit. And my first actual marathon, which was in 2004, I went into that. It was London, and I went into that woefully underprepared. So I'd done a few, I guess, what I thought were long distance runs, pretty sort of 10Ks, 15Ks. Up until that, I hadn't trained properly at all. And I went into it. And in the end, I think pure naivety and pig-headedness was probably a sort of secret weapon in that first ever event, because I had absolutely no idea what I was in store for. And I remember getting to about sort of 15, 20K and thinking, oh, this is okay. And this is the furthest I've ever run, and giving myself
And you had to do it again.
A little pat on the back. And then I went across Tower Bridge at halfway, and it all really started to fall apart from that point onwards. And I remember being overtaken somewhere around 19 miles by a 7-foot-tall womble and just wondering what on earth was going on. And I managed to get to the finish line somehow. That was my first experience of London, and it was awful, to be fair. And then I guess as the dust settled and the months went by, I thought, oh, well, yeah, maybe I'll try another one. And so second time round, I trained very, very hard. And my running journey started there, really, from that second marathon, probably late 2000s. And then I really picked up the bug for running around about sort of 2010, when I started training for some pretty extreme events, things like the North Pole Marathon and the Marathon des Sables and stuff like that. And it just escalated severely from there, basically.
So just going back to that first marathon. So what did you do? Sort of 4 hours 15 or something like that? Pretty good then.
350, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean that's still good running, isn't it?
It was okay. I mean, I was fairly consistent all the way around, but as I say, I think that complete naivety and lack of preparedness and just a real pig-headedness and refusal to give up was what got me to the finish line, and nothing else. No sort of natural ability or training at that point got me there, other than just being too stubborn to stop, really.
Because you've run under 3 hours now, haven't you, regularly, I think?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I mean, I got my times down to the sort of low 250s, mid 250s around about 2013. And that's when I really discovered, through 2011 to 2013, was where I discovered this strange ability to not to run particularly fast in the grand scheme of things. I mean, certainly not compared to some of these super marathon
the Kenyans or something,
that are running around 2 hours. But I seem to have this ability to be able to get up and do it the next day. So I developed this real love affair, if you like, with multi-day running. So multi-marathon running, doing 2 in 2s, 3 in 3s, and then ultimately 10 in 10s and beyond. And that's where I really found my forte, if you like.
I can't even get my head around that, really. I mean, the thought of I mean, most people, if most people ran one marathon in their lifetime in 4 hours, they'd be pleased, I think. To run 10 marathons in 10 days in, roughly 3 hours each day is just unbelievable. What is it about your body that allows you to do that? And also your mind, I guess, your mental strength.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a sort of saying out there amongst marathon runners, really, that running a marathon is 80-90% mental and 10-20% physical. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with that 100%, but I think there's a huge amount of truth in the mental fortitude that you need to do these distances. There is no such thing as an easy marathon. And even when you've done tens and eventually hundreds of them, certainly I never found an easy marathon. It was always a testing distance. It was always a mental test, and it was always a physical test. And that's one of the things I think that I loved the most about it, and the reason that I ended up running so many multiple marathons, because I wanted to test myself, and not just a physical ability, but I guess that mental fortitude as well. And and that's where I sort of found my natural flow, I suppose, when it came to running, was just sort of getting up and doing it all over again the next day.
So tell us about the North Pole Run. What was that all about, and how many miles was it?
So that was that was a marathon. So it was 26.2 miles, and it was actually one of my earlier marathons. I think it was the 10th marathon that I had done. And certainly that race was, the way I look at that is that the marathon at the North Pole was very much the finish line of a massive journey to get there. That's when I really knuckled down in 2009 and said, right, I'm going to train for this thing. And I'm going to go and do it in a year's time. And I put myself together a really comprehensive training program. I did a lot of cross training. I completely stopped drinking. I started eating a little bit better. So I really focused on the whole package, and I trained. And that's where I saw massive improvements in my general running. And then when we went to the North Pole, it was a fantastic event. It's arranged by an Irish chap called Richard Donovan, who's a lovely guy and a very, very accomplished Irish ultra runner. And you effectively have to get yourself to Svalbard Island, which is known as the Polar Bear Island, which is
yeah.
So ultimately the trip starts there. So you have to get yourself there, and then they take you up to the geographical North Pole, and you effectively run 26.2 miles on a lapped route around the North Pole. And it's absolutely fascinating because there's a base there, but of course, because the North Pole is covered in ice, it's constantly moving. So the geographical North Pole, when you're on the ice, you're sort of moving around it all of the time. And it's a Russian ice base. And what they do every year, I think it's turf wars between the Russians and the US, if the truth be told, but they fly a Russian airplane over the geographical North Pole. They throw a couple of tractors out. They throw a couple of guys out after these tractors who parachute down, get the thing started, make a 1 kilometre runway, and then you can effectively land a short landing plane on it. And when we were there, first of all, the weather was absolutely diabolical. It was the wind that was the real problem. We had about 35, 40 mile an hour winds. So we got stuck there for a couple of extra days. But you run this event, and there were 25 different nationalities. I think 25 different competitors from 10 different nationalities were represented. And I was there, obviously, for GB. Mm-hmm. And it's just you're out on the ice pack. There's nothing but white. There's some small domed tents, which is where you live for the duration of being there. And then they have this race called the North Pole Marathon, where you basically run around the geographical North Pole, and then you finish back at the ice base. And it was just an amazing experience.
One of the reasons we do interviews with people like Rik is to encourage people to to get their feet wet themselves. And I'm just going to speak from personal experience. So one of the things that's very important to me, I always say I don't want to die with regrets. And I want to, I'll pass on a story which I'm sure that you'll empathise with. So I've been playing sport at a high level since I was about 4 or 5 years old, and was county standard at probably 3 or 4 different sports. And I used to go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week and think that I was a bit of a hot shot because most people go to the gym, they do like 400 calorie trains, and the minimum I would do was 1,000. When was this? About 11 years ago, I had the opportunity to cycle from John O'Groats to Land's End. And I very foolishly as well, because I was doing it for a charity. The charity was a Portsmouth charity, and they said, "Oh, you couldn't call in in Portsmouth on the way back." So this was what was in itself an 800-mile cycle ride became 1,036 miles, which I being very OCD, decided I was going to do in 8 days. So I actually trained phenomenally hard for about a year, the same as you, giving up pies, drink and all that. Used to cycle 17.5-mile circuits on a Sunday, to the point the week before I did 6 17.5-mile circuits in 6 hours 24. But what my point is, I remember going to the gym about 3 weeks before that, and I did 4,430 calorie train, which was roughly, obviously, 4 times more than I thought what a good train was when I was much younger. So the moral of the story is obviously that in my earlier life, I'd never really got to the bottom of myself, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
and that's something that obviously you were prepared to do. You found you had this knack, and you weren't afraid, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. And my thing was always the marathon distance. I loved the marathon distance. Lots of people that I know run ultra marathons. Lots of people go do 50 milers. They do 100-mile races. And I was never really interested in that. I just found this love affair, I suppose, with the 26.2 magic distance. And I stuck with that for pretty much my whole running career. So it sort of peaked, I guess, around 2013, 2014. And as my times started to slow and family life started to take over a bit more, I've got sort of 2 young daughters, and my running started to take a back seat. I just look back on it and I think I was just so fortunate to have found that distance that I love so much, and to have travelled to have done it, to have done lots of different events and lots of different challenges that incorporated that distance. I just feel very fortunate to have done that, really.
So in closing, tell us a little bit about your business, Phoenix Running. What does that aim to do? So
Phoenix Running is just something that I love to do. So it was born out of my own running career. And when I stopped running as much myself, I really, really wanted to stay in touch with the running community, because the running community is a wonderful group of people. I absolutely believe that running is for every single person on this planet. It doesn't matter what shape or size or sex or colour or creed, it doesn't matter what your background is. Everybody with an able pair of legs can run. And I honestly believe that it enriches lives. And when my own running career started to wind down, I really wanted to stay in touch and try and give something back to the running community. And that's where I decided, well, I'd arrange an event or two, and it started, as you'd expect, I guess, small. And I thought, well, I'll put on an event and see what it's like to wear a race director's hat. And Phoenix Running was born out of that. So we literally tomorrow are about to host our 300th event.
Wow. So
we've got a big event planned down on the Thames towpath, and we've got lots of our regular runners coming along. So over the last 8 years or so, we've hosted 300 attended events. So those are events that people come along to, plus, of course, all the virtual events that we did during the pandemic. And I just really love doing it. It's not driven by the normal business triggers. It started out as a hobby, and I guess it still is really. It's not there to be run specifically as a business. It's there to bring running to everybody who wants to come and find it. And it's a real pleasure to be able to do it.
Fabulous. So in closing, has music been an important part of your life?
Music?
Yeah.
Yes, it has.
So do you think do you listen to songs in your head when you're running around, or not?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I listen to my music, earphones, etc. And then sometimes, I just imagine it in my brain, I suppose, when I'm running along.
So obviously, if you pick a song, I'll play it for you this week. So what song are we going to play that reflects your love of music, Rik?
Well, there's a song actually. I'm trying desperately to remember the name of it. I think it's the Aztec Project, and it's actually called Run, and it's a trance type, dance type music.
Oh yeah, just see you doing that.
I don't know whether you'll be able to find that, but I'm sure it's called the Aztec Project.
Of course, we can find it.
It's a great song, so that would be my choice.
Okay, Rik. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, and I wish you all the best in the award this week. Well, it's a few days now.
Yeah.
Keep inspiring other people.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, Rik. That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much.
Take care.
Aspen Waite Radio.